What do I do after my workers' compensation case gets settled? This is the moment we've all been waiting for. We finally wrap up our workers' compensation case. We get that big fat lump sum payment. We get to put it in the bank, and we're feeling really good about ourselves. But what's next? If you don't know what you're doing after you settle your case, you're going to be very careful because you could very quickly find yourself broke and unable to get the treatment that you need if you need it. So it's important to know what to expect after you settle your case, how to manage your money, how to make sure all of your medical treatment gets taken care of properly. What happens immediately after you settle your workers' compensation case? So, as we said in the past, settlements, there are different types of settlements. We have the Section 32, we have the stipulated agreement, we have the judge making a decision here. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, they all take about the same amount of time from that final decision up until you get your check, usually about 2 to 3 weeks after the final judge's decision. In certain circumstances, the insurance company can appeal, or you can appeal, and that obviously is going to drag that out much longer. But when everyone's on the same page and there's an agreement in place, give yourself 2 to 3 weeks before you get that check. If you are on a continuation of benefits, so you've been getting checks throughout your case, $400 a week, $500 a week, you're getting ongoing payments. Generally speaking, those payments stop when you have that final hearing and the judge approves, especially the Section 32 circumstance. You wait that 2 or 3 weeks and you get your final checks. One little subplot here is whether or not there's a structured settlement here or a lump sum. Here in New York, most settlements, when we do settle a case, it is a lump sum award. They don't really do structured settlements on the workers' comp side, but if it is a structured settlement, you're not going to get all of that money up front in one shot. It gets paid out over time. Here in New York, the only thing that's remotely close to that is if you're classified with a permanent partial disability and you don't agree to a 32 and you don't agree to otherwise settle the case, you're going to get a set amount of money over a set amount of time. It's dependent upon your loss of wage earning capacity, your LWEC. What other issues happen immediately after you file your workers' compensation case? Child support, taxes, and spousal maintenance. Here in New York State, your workers' compensation benefits, your monetary benefits, are tax-free. I love mentioning this to people who don't see it coming. People's eyes light up when you tell them that it's tax-free. If you are in arrears, if you owe outstanding child support, they will take that from your settlement, pay it off, and give you whatever's remaining. Not if you are on a child support schedule. If you're up to date with your payments and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and you don't owe back money, they're going to leave you alone. But if you owe back money, they're going to come in and take it and walk away and laugh at you as they walk out the door. So again, just to recap, here in New York, workers' compensation benefits, yay, not taxable, but they can be swept up if you owe child support, taxes, spousal maintenance, and things like that. And do you need to notify anybody? Yes. If you have a Social Security claim and you're receiving Social Security benefits, you might want to let them know. Any attorneys that you've used, any benefits that you're receiving around that time or that you've received as a result of that injury and those disabilities, you got to be mindful here because you could owe money and there could be an impact on other claims and other legal matters if you don't notify the right people. Talk to your lawyer, let them know where you're getting money from, alternate sources, and make a plan to handle this properly. How should you handle the funds after receiving your workers' compensation settlement? I love when my clients sit down and have this chat with me. And we've had clients that settle their cases and do Section 32s and get nice big fat checks and then call me a year later and they tell me I'm out of money. Or they come for an appointment and they roll up in their Range Rover with their diamond watch, tell me I need money, I need treatment. Well, that means you didn't plan it properly. You didn't handle your funds properly. So you got to be smart. Can you spend it on whatever you want? For the most part, you could spend it on whatever you want. Now, when we do a full and final Section 32, when we close out that whole case, there's usually an allocation for future medical and an allocation for your indemnity. The indemnity is money for you. You can do whatever you want with it. You could buy a new car, you could buy a condo, you can pay for your kids' college, you can technically do whatever you want. You can invest it wisely so it pays you back over the long term. Smart thing to do. The medical portion you're supposed to use for future medical care. And the reason why we do a Medicare set-aside, whether it's a required one or a discretionary Medicare set-aside, is to show that we have considered your future medical needs going down the road and that you have some money there to pay for it. But that medical money is supposed to be used for medical purposes. That said, if you are required to have a formal Medicare set-aside required by the federal government, they have a handbook that walk you through how you're supposed to administer your Medicare set-aside. Put it in a bank account, an interest-bearing bank account with a checking account, and you follow their rules to administer this money for future medical care. If you choose to spend that money on a new Honda Accord, they're not going to ever help you down the road. If you ever run out of that money that's set aside for your medical treatment, they're not going to help you because you use it for something else. Who else should you budget for? Social Security. Security. So I get comp, I get Social Security. What happens when I settle? What happens when I'm getting both? Social Security offsets. If the total comp and Social Security exceed 80% of your average weekly wage, Social Security will offset until you reach that 80% level. Now, what do you do when you go and you settle your workers' compensation case and you put $100,000 in your pocket like that in one shot, 1 week? Well, clearly that week is going to exceed your average weekly wage. So how do you avoid that? We use allocation rates. We show that although you are getting one big lump sum of money, you are allocating it out over a period of time or your lifetime, because that's what it's for. That's what you're using the money for, to sustain you. How does medical care work after settling your workers' compensation case? Okay, what's the difference between medical benefits being open and closed? So we've discussed in the past how we do indemnity only Section 32s, which close the indemnity, leave the medical open. There, nothing changes. You're entitled to all the medical that you're entitled to before you settle. Nothing changes there. The carrier is entitled to break your chops and send you to IMEs and deny your medical treatment. Same way they were doing it before. Nothing's going to change if it's an indemnity only settlement. Now, that being said, if you have settled your case, for instance, with a stipulated agreement, you say, well, we're going to agree that I have a 25% LWEC, loss of wage earning capacity, 25% permanent disability to my neck and my back, and I have a 30% loss of use of my hand and a 20 of my arm. Okay, well, what happens there is your case is going to be closed. You're going to get benefits for the scheduled loss if you're back at work at full duty, and your medical treatment is closed. You've been found to have reached maximum medical improvement. So if you do need future treatment down the road, if you do suffer a worsening in your condition, you do have the ability to potentially reopen a case like that and try for more active care, depending on what your doctor says. Can I go to my private health insurance? If your treatment that you're looking for is related to this accident, in this case that you have, your workers' comp case, generally speaking, an outside or a different insurance company is not going to pick up the bill. Now, do people fudge the facts and they don't tell them it's related? And do they hide things? Yeah, but it's, quite frankly, could be deemed insurance fraud. So you don't want to do that. So technically, can private health insurance help? They really shouldn't be under most circumstances. I warn clients all the time when they say, oh, I'm going to settle my case and just go through my wife's insurance. It's dangerous, because if they find out and they could, pull medical records just like anybody else, you don't want to get stuck. Do you stay in touch with the same healthcare provider? It's another big question I have. Generally, yes. We like people to reach that maximum medical improvement and kind of finish out their treatment. So you should be winding down with that doctor, but you should always keep a good rapport going and keep that line of communication, because you never know what's going to happen if you do need to go get treatment, if it's palliative care or if you have a new accident or anything like that. You want to get that doctor back on the phone and go back and see him. If it's a new accident, apportionment is an issue. Apportioning your overall level of disability to your first accident and your second accident, that doctor's in the best position to do that. And another question we get is, what if you need treatment that's not covered? It was being denied, the specific treatment was being controverted. Circumstances like that, you could potentially go to private health insurance if it's not related to the case, who was denied for being unrelated. That's really the biggest reason. What else should injured workers keep in mind after settling their case? So, like I said before, reopening your case. Section 32 is closed. Indemnity only Section 32 is closed. The medical is open, but stipulated agreements, you can reopen. Judges' decisions on permanent disability. I just had this discussion with a client earlier yesterday who was classified with like a 50% permanent impairment, and he wanted to reopen. You can reopen for treatment easier than reopening for reclassification. That's what we call it. If you think that your condition warrants reclassification, that they classified you too low, you have to show that you have a change in condition. You can't just say, hey, my doc is finding me totally disabled still a year after I was classified. It's not going to work. You need to show a significant change in condition, a significant worsening in condition. Not just that you need surgery, but surgery didn't help and now you can't move your arm. It's got to be a very significant change. Will returning to work affect your settlement? Returning to work after a case is settled and closed and done generally does not have an impact unless you settled the case by agreeing to an LWEC, a permanent partial disability finding, that would say you're entitled to $600 a week for the next 300 weeks. If you go back to work and you're earning the same that you were earning before the accident or more, your money's going to stop. We have a client who has a really bad neck injury. I was asking this exact question. Hey, I'm going to try to go back to work. I'm going to give it my best, and I don't know if I could do what I used to do. And if I can't, and I'm working half as much, do I still get benefits? If you earn less because of your injuries, then you're working at reduced earnings, and you might be entitled to up to 2/3 of the difference, subject to those statutory maximums that we've discussed. So if you do go back to work, but you can't work full duty, full time like you did before because of these injuries, you can still get benefits. Now, financial hardship. And these are the things you need to know that people don't tell you. If you've been classified with a permanent partial disability and you have greater than a 75% permanent impairment. So let's just say hypothetically you have a 76% permanent disability, you would get 425 weeks of compensation in the last year that you're entitled to benefits. If you are experiencing a financial hardship, you can apply for additional benefits, a hardship application. It's a form you fill out, it's online, and you send that in and you try to apply for more benefits under hardship. And this is exactly what lawyers are here for. That's why I'm here for you. If you have any questions, give me a call. 212-406-8989. We're here to help you. I'm happy to help you. I like helping people in these circumstances. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.